A new report from the Parliamentary Budget Office pegs the cost for the Canadian Navy's new surface combatant program at $8 billion more than its previous estimate. The report says the increase is due in part to the fact that production on the new fleet at the Irving Shipyard in Halifax will start later than originally planned. Earlier today, I spoke with Yves Giroux, the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Hi, Mr. Giroux. Great to see you again.
Likewise.
Let me start off with the report that your office has just released, and that is around the Navy's. You assessed essentially a revised cost estimate for the Navy's surface combatants. What did you find?
We found that the cost has risen by about $10 billion compared to our previous estimate that was done in 2017. So the cost has risen because of two things. So first, the Royal Canadian Navy has opted for a ship or series of ships, 15 to be more precise, that are a bit heavier. And in terms of weight, that's a determining factor when it comes to costing ships. The second factor is inflation. So when you wait to start a project that spans 20 years, there's inflation, and because the project spans a long period, it has implications and that are significant.
Okay, so that's basically what's changed. It's the inflation and the other thing. And then what about, is there any sort of government culpability here? Is there any way that increase could have been smaller?
Had the decision be made to start earlier with the procurement process, the cost would have been cheaper. That's the main factor. And going with a ship that is lighter would make the cost a bit lower. But of course, that's depending on the operational needs of the Royal Canadian Navy. And D&D officials and defense policy experts are in a much better position to determine whether the ship's size is appropriate or not.
I've probably done 1,000 procurement interviews where timeline is an issue to some extent.
My condolences.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure you've analyzed 1,000 as well. My condolences to you. As you look through this experience, though, is there recommendations going forward for other procurement processes when it comes to a timeline?
The earlier you start, the lower the cost is, obviously. So that's one very obvious recommendation, because delaying making a decision on procurement, if you need to procure the specific tools or equipment, delaying does not save you any costs. It only increases the costs.
Okay, let me turn now to another subject. The Conservatives released their climate change plan this week, and I interviewed their leader following the release of that, Andrew Scheer. And in talking about what he said would be the effectiveness of his program, he cited the report that you did on pricing carbon. Let's have a listen to what he said.
We did point to the Parliamentary Budget Officer report that indicated that our approach, by highlighting investments in technology, not just highlighting them, but accelerating them and incentivizing them, will have a greater impact on lowering emissions than the failed carbon tax.
So what Mr. Scheer was referring to in that report was a section that read, under an alternative scenario in which technological advancement and adoption happens faster than assumed, emissions could be 101 megatons lower than our baseline in 2030, which would better the Paris target by 22 megatons without requiring additional carbon pricing. And my understanding is the PBO actually ended up removing that section. Why?
Because the focus of the report was to provide an illustration to Canadians and parliamentarians of how much meeting the Paris targets would cost if we focused exclusively on carbon pricing. There are other instruments, regulations being one, and subsidies is another one, as well as technological advancements. So because there were some uncertainties with respect to the assumptions that ECCC, Environment and Climate Change Canada, had used regarding the various technological improvements. We decided to remove that from the report because the assumptions were not super clear in our opinion, and we didn't want that to become the focus of the report, because the main point of the report was to price meeting Paris targets using carbon emissions as an illustration. Of course, we can meet Paris targets with technology and regulations, but it's much more difficult to cost that without knowing specifically which type of technology or which type of regulations. And that's why we removed that very short paragraph from the report.
I just want to be clear, though, that I'm guessing the question will come up that would be politically motivated, because the Conservatives, decided to cite it in their justification for their own decisions, their own plan, and then the decision to remove it followed those announcements, right?
No. Well, it followed, but it was
there?
Not
I just want you to go on the
motivated by
record. Was it political at all?
Absolutely not. It was just because there was some uncertainty regarding ECCC's assumptions, what was included in their technology case, what was not included. By having a second and third and fourth look at the report, it wasn't very clear, even after a couple of readings, what was exactly included. So because that was very secondary to the report, we did not keep that in the report, but it doesn't change the rest of the report. The conclusions are still the same and they remain unchanged.
Does it change Mr. Scheer's citation, though, of your report as justification for the effectiveness of what he's saying?
No, it doesn't change anything because it's still true that technology itself can lead to meeting Paris targets.
So when and I know that the plan is for you to analyze various platforms during the election campaign, although the parties have to decide to submit them to you, but if you were to analyze something like the policy that was announced as a platform, how will you go about doing that? Like, what would be the way in which it would unfold?
Well, we would seek to get details from the political party as to how they want to operationalize specific proposals, because making an announcement is one thing, but often the devil is in the details, so you need to figure out exactly how it will be implemented, what are the timelines and so on. So you get these details, you use models that already exist. So for example, for carbon emissions, we already have models that exist and have been recognized by other institutions, and you are able to model the cost of specific proposals. When it comes to technological improvements, it's very difficult to anticipate what the future will bring. If it's subsidies, much easier. If it's regulations, you have to have a pretty good sense of the regulations themselves that are being planned.
So at the end of the day, for people watching, when they get the results of these during the election, what will they be able to glean? Will they be able to say, the Conservatives' plan cost this amount, the Liberals cost this amount? It's the cost that you're really going to be looking at. Right?
Exactly. So it depends what type of proposals the various political parties bring to us. If they bring to us some specific elements, we'll be costing these elements. If they bring to us various elements that comprise an entire sector, for example, the environmental platform, then we'll be able to cost that. So we'll be able to provide political parties and Canadians the cost of specific measures.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Giroux. Appreciate your time today.
My pleasure.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.